Just very quickly about FSI. FSI is a workforce solutions business. We're involved in the provision of recruitment services, both in the UK and overseas. I'm going to be focusing my talk mainly on the Gulf region and the recruitment practices in that region. But what we also do is provide advisory work, consultancy, testing and inspections and certification of labour supply chains, which I think is a business that we're going to be getting extremely busy in over the next couple of years. I'd like, before I go on, just quickly to introduce the team. We've come mob-handed today. Dan O'Donnell. Dan, do you want to just stand up quickly? Thanks. Dan is our managing director in the UK, for those of you who are based here. Ross Daines. Ross is our managing director, actually based in Dubai, but looks after the region. Alison Marsden is our director of social impact. So one of the things we're looking at very carefully is not just what increased productivity does an ethical recruitment process bring, but actually what is the social impact on those individuals and indeed their families and communities back home. And Nick Forster, my brother. Nick is based out in Washington. He heads up our office there, doing mainly lobbying work with US government and also business development for our ethical recruitment service. So I'm going to talk to you about the recruitment infrastructure. Sorry. This one. That. I'm not Steve, am I? That's me. How did FSI come about? Well, I'm ex-British Army Gurkhas, as actually are Dano and Ross. We realised that we might need to diversify a little bit in terms of our leadership team, and Nick is the business brains, or some of the business brains behind FSI. And Alison's background, funnily enough, is not in the Gurkhas, but she did grow up in Nepal, speaks fluent Nepali, and has a development background, so very, very good understanding of labour supply chains. And I think, we'd love to talk to many of you later and in due course about our particular area of expertise. But really it comes down to that detailed knowledge of what is going on in the source countries in your labour supply chains. And what we would love to do is bring that knowledge to help you understand the problem and some cunning plans as how you can address those problems. So in the GCC, what is going on? Well, largely construction and other businesses in the GCC have a joint venture type agreement with a local company. That local company, whether we're talking Qatar, UAE, or across the GCC, generally has the responsibilities for the recruitment of the migrant workers, which really among whom the biggest risk in terms of modern slavery exists. It is at times very challenging to get those local partners to fully embrace the idea that what you are trying to achieve is an exploitation-free labour supply chain, not surprisingly, because relationships have been built up over many, many years with multiple agencies in multiple source countries, which is based on a model which is anything but ethical. Indeed, the model for the recruitment and management of migrant workers across the GCC is fundamentally exploitative, and there's no question as to whether this is true. This is not just our own experience, but it is the findings of many of the studies that have been done by Verite and many other people, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. So what is the situation? Generally, there are multiple agents involved between the employing company on the ground in the GCC and the individual back in the village hoping for a job overseas. The individual generally is first contacted by an agent who charges them money, a few $100s, in order to link them up with a manpower company who charges them, in many cases, thousands of dollars, in order to link them up with an employment opportunity overseas. They are told that they will earn a certain amount of money by these agents, and the reality is that when they get on the ground in the destination country, most often the amount of money that they were promised does not transpire, does not materialize. They are lied to about the terms and conditions of employment, because if they were told the truth, they wouldn't get on the plane. also in this process, they become aware that the amounts of money that they're going to have to pay are more than they can possibly afford before they've embarked on their employment overseas. So they end up in a situation where they're going to pay off a debt from their wages. What they don't understand is very often that debt is at 40% interest. So having understood that they would pay off their debt with the particular salary they were promised over, let's say, 6 months to a year, they get on the ground, understand the interest, and realize that they're going to be 2 years before they're actually sending any money to their families. You can imagine what that does, how that impacts on somebody's morale, and of course their productivity, and thus your productivity. So I've set the scene as to what the recruitment operations in the Gulf are based on. What are the risks to a UK company? Well, I think they're fairly clear, and it's for other people today really to highlight to what extent in future there are going to be, for example, class actions brought where multiple workers have come together under a particular legal company to do a class action for all the money that they have paid to get their jobs. From our understanding, it is a breach of Section 7 of the Bribery Act. It hasn't happened yet, but we know it is starting to happen in the US relating to exactly the same issue. So I do think there is a genuine risk in that regard in terms of breach of legislation. There's clearly a reputational risk, and actually one of the key elements that we advise on is the productivity risk that you suffer by having a demoralized and a demoralized workforce who have also been recruited based on a coerced willingness to pay money rather than on their willingness and capability to do the job of work that you want them to do. Obviously, the issues of how a migrant workforce is treated from a health and safety perspective is key. Obviously, how they're accommodated is key. But one of the fundamentals that leads to productivity or otherwise is the debt bondage that they carry or don't. And I would just like to emphasize that from our experience, 90% of low-skill migrant workers in the Gulf are suffering various severities of this debt bondage problem. So bluntly, we're all exposed to it. So what's the alternative? Well, there are more and more organizations out there. Neil Wilkins next is going to speak about their efforts. In terms of what we're doing, we have a fully vertically integrated labor supply chain, such that we make the contact at the village level and we look after the recruit right the way through till they're on your projects on the ground. That obviously, that vertical integration, ownership of the whole process is very useful to our clients to know that they have that by working with us. What are the other options? Well, we and other good people out there who fully understand the problem are offering consultancy services now, which are becoming ever more popular, in order to help you understand the issue beyond just a Modern Slavery Act report, but actually to help you with actionable advice as to, over a period of time, how you can move from suffering from debt bondage in your supply chain to debt bondage free. And there's, please talk to us later, there's various people that we can refer you to. Finally, I'd just like to say, in construction, we're about to embark on a project in Qatar, the first of its kind, with a company called Daruna, who are building high-quality labor accommodation. We'll be providing 1,800 construction workers recruited from the villages in Nepal, managed by ex-British Army Gurkha engineers who have the requisite leadership skills as well as the technical background. And that project will be a best practice project in terms of how the workers are also recruited but also managed to achieve the best possible productivity. Obviously, there's not a lot of data out there as to the benefits that ethical recruitment can provide, but this will be evaluated by BRE and Constructing Excellence from a productivity uplift perspective and from various other partners from a monitoring and evaluation of social impact. So we look forward to the results of that, and thank you very much for introducing us today. Cheers.